welcome to this week's Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts for today are myself, Carol Tallon. Brian Fox is not with us today. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, we're recording remotely, so apologies for any poor sound quality. I'm now joined remotely by William Power and Brian Bolger of C&W O'Brien Architects. William and Brian, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Carol. Very nice to be here.
Okay, so look, we'll start, William, we might start with you in terms of looking at the planning. You know, what a difference a week makes. Really, a lot has happened in the last week. So you might tell us from a planning point of view, because it seems like we've gotten a few different planning updates and briefings from the department and from the Office of Planning Regulator. So you might just run through where things are at the moment.
So I suppose last week, the Minister, Owen Murphy, put a pause or enacted a pause that was part of the emergency legislation that went through the Dáil the previous week. And what that has done is push out, I suppose, anything that's in public consultation at the moment. So anything, I suppose, for the first 5 weeks of all planning applications, the public have an ability to be able to voice their opinion. And anything that's in that period at the moment has basically been put on a pause. And that's currently, I think, for 3 weeks, if I remember correctly. And it'll be obviously be reviewed on the basis of what's going on out in the wider community.
Okay, now look, obviously public consultation in the context of planning is something that I've been a very strong advocate for over the last number of years. So I'm asking this question kind of without agenda, but are there elements of the planning that can proceed at the moment? Like, what elements can proceed irrespective of this pause, or is everything on hold?
No. So anything that's gone through and is out the far side of the public consultation, so anything that's kind of in the system longer than 5 weeks, the council and Bord Pleanála in relation to SHD applications have the ability to be able to make their decision. Now, obviously, they're under the same pressures as all the rest of us as well. So there is some relaxation, I suppose, in terms of what's happening and what we're seeing happening with active planning applications.
Okay, and we did see last week that on Bord Pleanála had actually quite a busy week. You know, by the middle of the week, I think they'd published decisions on about 800 or 850 homes across mainly Dublin. So they are still making decisions. So do we know how long that's likely to continue for?
They are, and from what we understand as well, there's kind of a priority put on making the decision on the full applications. We are, I suppose, ourselves experiencing delays in terms of getting opinions in regards to the first stage of SHDs from the board. But look, I think the thing here is to kind of just push on, and hopefully decisions will be made. It seems to be the case that everyone's getting set up working from home, so there's always going to be delays around that. But I think hopefully there won't be too much of a slowdown.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But look, it's positive to see some applications coming forward. You know, even if there is a period there where it needs to be paused. But Brian, what kind of advice are you giving to clients coming to you now? You know, like, what kind of guidance can you give them given the uncertainty?
Well, I suppose we're treating it like William says. It's a 3 week kind of pause or an extension, and you could liken that to when you lodge an application just before the Christmas period. The 2 weeks over Christmas are excluded from the process. So we're kind of saying to our clients, look, it's that, and at the moment it's no more than that. There is an opportunity for the government to extend that a further 3 weeks, and I suppose, you know, objectively looking at the way things have gone, that might be something that will have to be considered. But I suppose it just allows due process to continue, and in a fairness, to put the extra 23 days onto the public public period. So we're advising clients just to keep going forward with it, because once you can still lodge an application, you can still apply for a pre-planning application, and I suppose like all of these things, once you're in the system, it can be and will be dealt with. The timing of it might be slightly uncertain, but it's not likely to. I suppose to upset too dramatically. I think it's more important that you proceed and get into the system, and that's what we've been advising our clients to do. That just continue as best we can.
Okay, but in terms of capacity to do, because then what we're seeing is a likely backlog of submitted cases. So how are they likely to be dealt with?
Well, I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it? I suppose no more than the councils and everybody else trying to work remotely or trying to review these things. It kind of it creates a bigger picture as to maybe the format in which we submit our documents could be maybe a little bit more streamlined. I mean, you'll be aware, Carol, like an SHD application can be quite a voluminous amount of paper, and yet at the same time, the documents themselves are published on a website, so everything that goes in by paper is up on a portal, and I think it will certainly raise the questions as to how do we go forward. This is a perfect example of maybe the timing for starting to review the applications. I know that certain councils will allow applications to be lodged online, but they're usually smaller domestic applications and not commercial.
Yeah.
So I think I'd still say getting the applications in, is probably the important bit. It's like if you had an appeal and the board were under pressure, they'll write to you and say that they need to extend the timeline. It's the same with fire safety certificate applications, and I agree with you. There is more than likely going to be a backlog, or at least a time lag on decisions being made. But it'll extend across all applications. There's not any way of circumventing that, as far as I'm aware at the moment. So best to be in the system than not in the system at all, and then trying to ponder, when would that backlog rush through?
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important point about digital submissions, and I'd love to hear both your opinions on this. But certainly, we have been involved in pushing for digital submissions for planning over the past about 2 to 3 years. And, it did look over the last year or 18 months like there was progress being made. And certainly with the establishment of the Office of the Planning Regulator, who was taking a very pro-digital submission approach, it did feel like change was getting closer. And yet that didn't happen. So there's an argument to be made now, while the process is somewhat disrupted, is this the time to be looking at, should digital submissions be part of the solution to dealing with backlogs?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I think no more than ourselves, like we've had to put the entire office into remote working practice, and at the same time being able to access everything that you would normally get access through on a daily basis, that it allows you to do that, to get back into your own servers and people to collaborate together. If the planning system was, we'll just say, modelled as it is on the UK system, which is that all planning applications are made digitally, submitted digitally, paid for digitally. It's a one portal, and I suppose the basis is already there. The building control system, which was introduced back in 2014 by Minister Phil Hogan at the time, for building control submissions, that's an entire portal system. So if you take it that the government has already got a system, a similar system in place and working, that it could be applied to the planning process. And as I said before, there are smaller applications through certain councils that are done with a digital submission, and that would also facilitate the council members themselves, like in the planning office and the wider council departments, to be able to look at the documents that are online if it was also submitted digitally. So it's absolutely the right time to be considering it now.
Yeah, and okay, well, William, I'll bring you in here. Look, if the consensus in the industry is that we need to progress this, and the consensus appears to be coming from the state that we need to progress this. Where is the mismatch? Where is this falling down?
I'm not sure, but it's I suppose there's probably, everyone's busy, so like every time you try change something, there's always a resistance to doing it. But I think that the advantage BCAR had, I suppose, was that it was a whole new system, so they were able to set that up from the get-go. If you look at what happens, like the consultants compile a massive PDFs and documents and certs, which are then uploaded to the system. And from the system, they go out to whichever local authority is looking at it. So, like, it's already, I suppose, the structure is already there. It's just about building on that. And then, I suppose, if we look, like, I suppose Brian mentioned the UK model. Like, if we look further afield, I can look as far afield as Singapore, like, where they're actually making planning decisions based on models. For a long time, we've been pushing, and I suppose Ireland's pretty forward thinking in terms of using BIM models and stuff like that. It'd be great to get to a place where we can actually submit these things and they become part of the decision making process.
Okay, but I think in Singapore they're actually also using artificial intelligence to facilitate decisions as well. Yeah. Whereas when that was approached with Irish planners, people balked at the idea that we could possibly allow artificial intelligence to come up and work within a master plan, or to work within, where there are guidelines in place to actually allow AI that we know objectively would probably do the right job, but yet the culture hasn't changed. The appetite for that just wasn't there in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, I suppose
is that likely to change?
If you look at what happens in the process at the moment, so like part of every SHD, there's a housing quality assessment document that goes in. So in a big scheme of 1,000+ units, you're looking at what is an Excel that has thousands of fields in there that someone needs to check to go, is this bedroom meeting minimum areas? Is this apartment? Like, I suppose the ability for AI to come in there and to do it. So, like, it obviously would need a structured document or a template to fill in. But if people are filling in that, then that can be run through a computer and save probably it has to be 100 man hours more of time that can actually be spent analysing the application in terms of the planning side of it.
Yeah, but then, okay, how far are we away from having the capacity to do that? Because I think it's interesting, Brian, that you referenced that say in terms of the building control system that was in place, whereas actually one of the points of objection we've gotten from planning departments nationwide is that there isn't one cohesive system. So in fact, we've actually had people say from looking at things from a conservation point of view, saying that they couldn't access within, say, one local authority. They couldn't physically find everything got to do with one planning application, because they're actually, even people within the same local authorities in different departments are working off different systems. And this was seen as one of the potential impediments to accepting digital submissions. So, like, how far away realistically are we from being able to do this?
I actually don't think we're that far away. I think it's like, as you say, it's a concerted effort to say we need to shift across to that system. And I know at the very beginning of the BCAR system, there were a lot of teething problems. I wouldn't say it was a rush, but it was certainly, there were a lot of stakeholders trying to ensure that, what went into the system and how it was put into the system actually made sense, rather than being just a big depository of documents that had no format as to how to recover or get back the information. And that was from the councils or the building control side. They had to ensure that the information that was going in was at least traceable and could be tracked. I think I'd go back to the point about, a typical SHD application, whereby, if you think you have to prepare a website which goes live for the duration of the SHD application, and that is the very simplest version of a portal to all the documents that are available. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't see how much of a leap it would be to have a centralized government planning portal and to mimic the same thing. And it could be, available for all the departments. And clearly this period that we're in, as you say, if the documents are sitting in a box, on a desk or on a floor in the local council, then obviously it's very difficult for other departments to get access to them. So digital information is really the only way forward, as I see it. I can't imagine that we're that far out from having that as an option, but it probably takes something like this to focus the mind and say, this would facilitate, a huge amount of man hours.
If you look at, if you look at the SHD process, like when that came in first, the board were talking about upgrading their system. So currently there are applications that have been decided that there is no way to get access to the historic record of that. So because the websites are in the control of the applicant, so once it's the application is dealt with, they tend to come down. And not all of the councils are replicating the SHD applications on their system. So some of them, like Kildare County Council, South Dublin, are. So like you can go on there and find a replica of all of the documents that have been on the application, but they're not all doing it, which to me is an issue when it comes to looking at the historical record.
Yeah, it would also seem like a logical first step towards a more united or a more unified system. But look, I think that we're only really at the start of this conversation, but it does feel like the right opportunity for these steps to be taken. So we hope that that's obviously something that will happen. So look, we leave it there for now, but hopefully this is a bit an issue that we will be able to revisit, and there will be some positive move around this. So our thanks again to William Power and Brian Bolger, both of C&W O'Brien Architects. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining. And we'll take a quick break now. Stay tuned.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. I'm joined on air by Tom Parlon, Director General of the Construction Industry Federation. Tom, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Okay, so Tom, tell me, how are your members finding things at the moment?
Well, I suppose, Carol, since the Taoiseach's announcement last Friday week, that evening, and then the government provided their guidance the next day, which basically said very clearly that construction companies, unless you were working on specific HSE projects to do with COVID-19, or unless you were part of the essential services to the global supply chain, and obviously that is a big part of the general industry here, and this is where medicine, pharma, security, cyber, cloud, data center projects, and mainly by the big foreign direct investment here. If you're involved in those projects, you were clear to continue working, provided, of course, you stayed within the very strict guidelines. So I'd say maybe at the minute about 90% of the industry is closed, workers are at home, and the other 10% are working away at those essential services. And some of the projects that are being done under massive pressure for the HSE now, I know that companies are working practically 24/7 to create new hospital and new beds and so on.
Okay, is it fair to say there was some confusion over what was classified as essential for the first few days?
Well, I think the guidance left it vague enough, and it does say that the client has to self-declare. So if you're a big multinational and you feel that you're part of the global supply chain that's responding to COVID-19, you declare that I'm an essential service, and then people have to work. There was some issue. Obviously, the whole issue of contractual entitlements is a very big issue for construction firms. And in some cases, until contractors got a direction that they were to cease working and that the actual site was non-essential, there was a little bit of confusion there. But obviously there will be a lot of disputes to be resolved. We're still seeking clarity from the Office of Government Procurement and from the government with regard to public sector projects. And we would hope that fairness will be involved and they won't take advantage of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the contracts are going to be a huge thing. So do we need for, on public contracts, do we need for the state to take a lead in this to show the private sector really how such contract disputes need to be dealt with?
Well, I think the opposite is nearly the case. A lot of the private sectors have announced their intentions to contractors, and it is important that the state would take a lead. We're still awaiting a note from the OGP. It has to be signed off by the Department of Public Expenditure. But everybody, I suppose, has to be very careful that they don't leave themselves exposed to massive claims. But the industry has been badly hit. I think there's no question about it. It is going to cause immeasurable losses to individual firms. The workers that are sent home currently are on €350 a week. That's obviously substantially less than they were earning previously. Mm-hmm. So we have two crises. We have the continuing COVID-19 health crisis, and we have a very, very fastly growing financial crisis that is going to have implications for everybody in the country, but particularly for the construction industry.
Oh, yeah. And look, again, that is something that stretches far beyond this industry, but just as it's important that we look and we kind of break it down to a level whereby people who are not feeling very empowered at the moment, where they know what they ought to be doing at this stage, because you mentioned there about, ways that they can mitigate losses. But, in this climate of uncertainty at the moment, what we know for now is that the lockdown will continue until the 12th, next Sunday, the 12th of April. But obviously, who knows what's going to happen after that. So are there things that you're advising your members through the CIF, where you're advising members to do to mitigate losses?
Well, all of our directors and teams are still working from home. We have a Zoom call every morning at 10 o'clock, and we send out an all-members bulletin every day advising them up to date. And clearly contractual issues is a big issue, and we give them the best advice possible, depending on whether it be public or private, as to what to seek clarity on the different contractual issues. And that's a very technical side, and our contractual experts within, have been very busy on that. Then there's all the industrial relations side and how to deal with those and so on, how to qualify for the different schemes and so on. And there's basically a lot of individual issues. But I suppose what we are doing now, our Health and Safety Committee has been expanded very, very substantially to nearly 40 people. And they are coming up with a standardised approach to the restarting of construction projects in Ireland. And that's not to say that it's going to start next week or the 12th or whenever. But what it is, accepting that when the industry does start, it is going to be an entirely different operation on site. There's going to have to be substantial new investments there. There's going to have to be substantial new protocols. And in actual fact, the guidance there that they're working on, and we hope to have a final draft this evening, it runs to 32 different points, covering practically everything. But basically, I suppose it is to give comfort to the government that these are very safe places to work. Mm-hmm. It's to give comfort, in particular, to the workers who are going to come in there, that they will be safe in work. And health and safety has always been a very, very strong culture within construction, but it was before we faced the threat of COVID-19. So it's going to provide a lot of challenges to the industry, but it is even going to include an offsite induction that everybody who is going back to work, and this is being at the early stage when there may be some restricted working on some of those bigger sites, mm-hmm. Everybody has to do an online induction course to make them fully read into what the new arrangements are, and the whole area of social distancing, the whole area of security, biometric, all of those issues. I think all sites will have to have C19 champions or marshals to supervise that all of the procedures and protocols that are being put in place are being adhered to, and so on. So it's a very, very substantial protocol, and obviously, we'll present it to government members of the unions, present it to the clients and so on, and present it to our own members, that people will be getting their heads in the right place for whenever construction does return to work.
Yeah, and and that's exactly what's needed at the moment. There needs to be some clarity when there's so much confusion out there. But one thing that you said that you said previously, which I thought was very stark, is that your members will not be returning to the same workplace. They won't be returning to the type of workplace they've been familiar with before.
No, I mean, sites by virtue of their existence out, the positives are they're practically all outdoor. And generally, there's lots of space, but lots of elements of that, maybe fit out, maybe fitting windows or doors and so on, does requires people to work certainly closer than the 2 meters. That is the restriction at the moment. So it's coming up with protocols to get around that. Now, in some cases, it may mean that if somebody has to do that for a short period, they may have to wear very, very extensive PPE gear. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it may have to be that particular project may have to be mechanised. But it is going to mean that there will be a lot less people on site. Sites certainly won't be opening to their full extent. And that just the protocols and the cleaning regime and the whole waste management and probably shorter working hours. I know there was a suggestion coming from Australia that they were going to open sites 24/7. And that would mean that the site could stay open, but might only have maybe a fraction of the people on at any time that would work Saturdays, Sundays, and through the day, the evenings, the long evenings now, in order to mean that the full workforce could get better opportunity of working without having the full workforce on site at one time.
And do you think that's something that the unions in Ireland would go for?
Well, it's something that we're talking them to, but clearly until the final draft is done and the comprehensive nature of that is established, we don't want to really engage them. But, I think certainly the sites that are working at the moment, and there are substantial sites working at the moment, workers there are happy to come in because they know that they're essential services. They're happy because their employers have put very, very strict measures in place so as they're safe. But that has to be spread out on a wider basis now. And I think certainly the distancing is certainly going to be a factor for quite a while.
Okay, and we know that when restrictions are lifted, they won't be restricted en masse. It'll be a gradual lifting of restrictions. Is the construction industry coming at this with a bit of an advantage, given that they've such a strong emphasis on health and safety, and the fact that every site has, unlike other typical or other traditional businesses, every building site has somebody who's responsible and trained in health and safety and who is accountable on site. Does that give some form of an advantage coming back into this?
Well, I think it gives a minor advantage, Carol, but clearly that, is going to have to be, I know from previous, some of the sites that introduced really tough, not tough, but comprehensive protocols. The issue was people didn't just seem to sort of respect them. And I think that's changed a lot now with the fact that COVID has become so much more serious. And clearly there will be workers who will want to stay home, depending on their family situation, depending on maybe aged people in the house and so on. But, I feel that when we see the frontline health people, the civil servants that are working around the clock, the food service, the people working in the Tesco's and the supermarkets, there's no reason that construction workers should feel that they're any more precious than anybody else. We do need essential services to continue. We do need to get the economy back going, certainly not at the risk of any further spread of the disease. So I think it's getting people's heads into that right place, because we can only afford to have the whole economy closed down for a certain period. It is going to start up again. And I did hear the Finance Minister, Pascal Donoghue, saying that corporation tax is going to be a very, very big part of the recovery. And those big clients that are working in the whole global supply chain. And we have some pharma companies here who are right at the cutting edge. And some of those sites are open, clean rooms are being built. And whether it be drugs to counter disease or vaccines, it's essential, because you can imagine the scale of production that's going to be necessary to cover this global demand if somebody comes forward with a drug that is going to deal with COVID.
Okay, and of course Ireland has such a strong legacy of pharma, and it's such an important part of the national economy. So actually that almost brings us full circle to capacity. As and when the industry needs to get going again, will the capacity be there to do that?
Well, obviously we were being stretched a bit, and now all of a sudden practically 90% of the industry is stood down. So it is going to take a while to get that up. But just on terms of the big players, our bigger companies in particular that have been used to dealing with with clean rooms, with the very complicated IT and data center stuff, they have a fantastic resource as well, and it has been offered, to the HSE in terms of rigging up new hospitals and so on. The whole production of oxygen and the whole availability of oxygen is a big factor. And I know a lot of our companies are offering their services there and their expertise and their supply chains because all of the products that are in demand globally.
Yeah.
So, I would hope that, and I do know, I've seen the efforts that some CIF members have made in terms of offering their services and their expertise, and it is substantial. And I know the HSE is under massive pressure. So hopefully, that collaboration and working together will give us a good result.
Yeah, okay. And look, that's what we want to see. It is the epitome of we're all in this together. Everybody's doing their bit. And I've seen a number of your members have come forward and actually donated their PPE equipment to frontline workers, which is amazing. So
That's right, yeah.
So we've seen a huge effort coming from the construction industry, and I suppose one of the things that I'd love to get more clarity on today for your members, I mean, it's great that you're briefing members daily on what they ought to be doing, how they ought to be using this time. And I appreciate that's very difficult given the absolute uncertainty that we're in at this moment. But in terms of the restarting construction and restarting sites pack that your team are working on, I suppose, do you know when that can be expected?
Well, again, we hope to have the final draft this evening. We have to review it then, but it'll be out. It'll be out to members, and it'll be presented to the likes of the IDA, to our clients, to government departments, hopefully by Wednesday. But in particular, members are going to have to look down through it and look at the 32 different points on it, and start preparing and say, well, look at when I go back, this is the way it's going to have to be done. And clearly, it's going to be investment, and we're going to have to get support for that. And there's going to be cost implications as well. And a group, as soon as the final draft is, a group of commercial managers have agreed to sit as we're doing, just like our conversation now. All of our meetings are taking place at distance, and they're being done online with Zoom and with other facilities. A commercial manager is going to examine that and try and work out the cost implications, because clearly clients are going to have to factor that in as well, that if the contractors and subcontractors, clearly there's going to be substantial lack of productivity working under the new regime. There's going to be a whole lot of investments to be made as well, and that is going to have an impact on the overall cost, and we're going to try and work that out. And then there will be discussions with clients, be the big multinationals or be it the state, with regard to how that's going to work out.
Okay, so I suppose at this stage your members need to, and the industry at large need to sit and wait for that. In terms of the supports that have been made available, are your members finding those satisfactory?
Well, I think in terms of the supports for the employees, yes, they are. And I think the speed with which the government have moved there, and the Department of, and the Revenue Department in particular, and the Department of Social Welfare, that's good. And people are getting their payments. There will be a day of reckoning, of course, as well, that anyone that doesn't qualify and has qualified, and companies are very conscious of that. But basically, this is going to test the cash reserves of companies, because trying to keep an operation afloat over a time period that we don't know how long it's going to be, and then being in a position to sort of kickstart it again at a much higher cost level is certainly going to challenge companies. And I know the Irish government are looking at what's happening internationally, and hopefully they won't be found wanting, because we are going to need an economic stimulus, and certainly construction and investment in infrastructure is one of the best returning economic stimuli that you can do.
Yeah. Look, Tom, thank you so much. We'll leave it there. Thank you particularly for giving some much needed clarity, and we look forward to the publication of your Restarting Construction and going through all of those points. I think it's exactly what members need to do to feel empowered and to be able to take action during this time, so that they're actually working on their business and being prepared for, I suppose, being prepared as soon as it's safe to return. So thank you so much. That was Tom Parlon, Director General of the Construction Industry Federation. We need to take another quick break and we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
Everything's Fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon, recording from home as the radio station is operating remotely in full compliance with government guidelines at the moment. I'm delighted to be joined on the air now by Shane Dempsey from the Construction Industry Federation and Arthur O'Brien of C&W O'Brien. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome.
Thanks for having us, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. How are you?
Good. Thank you. So now we're going to get stuck straight into it, because really this has been such an uncertain few weeks, and while the construction sites now have been shut down, which is a huge change since we aired last week, it was something that was seen as almost inevitable at that stage. And there's been a lot of commentary in the media, particularly this morning in the Irish Times. What I want to move on to with you both, if that's all right, is let's try to look towards the future of construction and what that's likely to look at like when we get back to action. So Arthur, I might just start with you. Just in terms of the future of construction and getting back onto site, you know, when activity resumes, what are we likely to be looking at?
Well, I think, Carl, there's certainly going to be a catch-up period when we all try and, you know, restart ourselves. The communication chains will have been down for some time. The delivery of materials to site will have been down for some time. And just from people working on site to try and re-engage with the work that they left behind 2 weeks ago, there's going to be a natural lag in just bringing that back up to speed. I think that's just the kind of infrastructure and the working together and the communication side of it. I think also we're unlikely to see a full mobilization of everybody and every subcontractor back to site. I know that even on some of the essential sites at the moment, they're working through where they're allowing one subcontractor in at a time onto the site. Electrician goes in, does his bit. A plumber, they go in and do their bit. And so even that kind of way of working, which I think may happen, I'm hoping it doesn't, but I think it may, is going to dramatically slow down our ability to complete our work. And that's going to have a significant effect on timeframes, delivery of buildings, both in the public and private sector.
Absolutely. But do we know how those delays in construction programme are likely to impact the industry? So, Shane, from your perspective and members of the Construction Industry Federation, do you know yet what that's likely to look like in terms of contracts that aren't being adhered to because of the coronavirus and restrictions put in place? How are your members handling that?
Yeah, I think we're nearly looking too far ahead at the situation, because it's very much live at the moment, and estimates around productivity lag and the productivity impact of these new measures, if and when we return to work, they're impossible to measure for the moment. But we're operating off information that the health measures that have been put in place are part of a kind of a 24-week cycle, which is kind of WHO best practice for health authorities. So we're currently starting week 6 now, with the peak expected to happen in week 7 and 8. And the really restrictive measures that have effectively shut down the industry started in week 4 and will run on until 3 or 4 weeks after the peak of the pandemic in Ireland, whenever that may be. And that might only be the first peak in this pandemic, which is very worrying. But we're looking there at a date of around the 3rd week in May, when there may be the health authorities might consider removing some of the restrictions that have shut the industry down. So first of all, that's an Archer's alluding to. That's a huge chunk of time where there's no activity going on. The longer, a bit like unemployment, the longer activity stalls for, the longer it will take to ramp up again. So you can assume that it'll take another month or two to get bigger sites open. I'd be particularly concerned for the housing side, and Archer, I don't know whether you'd agree with me on this, but like their liquidity and their flow of finance dries up relatively quickly in relation to other parts of the industry. So I'd be very concerned about this year's housing output. I think everyone's accepting that it'll be down on what was predicted, but also this kind of glut, or this kind of pause in activity can have a knock-on impact in 2021 as well. So not good news for resolving the housing crisis. And I suppose on the contracting side, then a lot of contractors, particularly those dealing with public sector work, will now be struggling to come to terms with the new contractual reality. They will have to implement, new health and safety procedures that, as Arthur said there, will probably drop productivity in the initial phases down by 60%. Like we're talking about one man, one room, we're talking about one team at a time on site. These kind of hugely logistically difficult work practices, and they have knock-on impacts for timelines. And as you know, in the public sector, the contracts are very strict, and delays and unforeseen costs generally tend to fall on the contractor. And if these contractors have been operating as they have been, even when times are relatively good before COVID, these contractors are working at a 2% profit margin. They really will be put to the pin of their collar unless there's flexibility on the public sector side.
Okay, and I know that no flexibility has yet to be shown from the public sector side, and I know it was it's something that we discussed in an earlier interview with your Director General, Tom Parlon, there, when he spoke about how actually the private sector clients are probably taking the lead in this, and they're coming to the table to discuss things kind of at a much earlier pace than we've seen from the public sector. So obviously we hope that changes. But Arthur, in terms of the contracts that you're dealing with, you've had quite a busy few weeks. In your practice in C&W O'Brien Architects.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've had some of our housing sites closed down, and I think they're driven by sales and expected and predicted sales, and they're, dare I say, easier to close down, and I think also easier, in inverted commas, to drive back up again. They're not as difficult as some of the bigger major projects where you've got multi-story buildings on complicated sites where it's a little bit tougher to get that going, or some of the more technical IT sites and pharmaceutical sites. It takes a bit of while to slow those down and drive them back up. Having said all that, I think we've got quite a lot of I think forward-thinking clients and forward-thinking funds and developers. Everybody is trying to deal with the issues that we have, which are right now, which is the 2 to 3 month closure that we may have. But we see a whole chunk of our clients looking past that. We've been lodging applications, and you might have seen quite a large one in the Irish Times over the weekend in Barnhill going in for SHD. We have 3 more of those to go in this month. So those clients are pushing on because they know that the coronavirus is going to be well past by the time they get anywhere near a site. And we've even had clients last week. We were dealing with clients who were purchasing 3 separate sites, 3 separate clients looking at 3 separate sites. And the work that we've been doing over the last few weeks and months has brought all of that to fruition. So we see generally looking forward, looking beyond the immediate issues that we're all facing, that we're going to come back out of this in a business as normal in terms of driving work forward. How we deal with that work when we get to site is is quagmire that we all have to deal with as the whole playing field evolves, and that's where we are.
Yeah. But that's interesting, and it's probably one of the more, I suppose it's maybe one of the more optimistic things that I've heard over the past number of weeks. One of the other conversations that was starting to happen then is, unlike with the recovery that we might have seen after the crash, where there was very much a drip recovery, here there's going to be an element of people, organizations they need to hit the ground running. They'll need to come out the gate charging. And obviously we want businesses to be prepared and ready to do this. But is there an argument that, when things are disrupted, it's actually a good time to make changes that ought to be made? So, for example, across the property and real estate side of things, we're seeing IPAV call for changes in the conveyancing side of things because the market is disrupted now. The process is disrupted. So this is a good time to fix things that are broken and to move things along, maybe in line with international standards of innovation. So does that make this maybe a good opportunity to think about methods of offsite construction and modular building?
Yeah, Carl, I think it's a huge opportunity, and it's an opportunity driven by need, and by reacting to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I think the whole digital age that's been there for so many years, that we've all, look, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other, and here we are in 3 separate locations, carrying on as if we were all sitting in the same room, and that's happening every day. I'm having umpteen of those meetings every day with clients, with consultants, with my own team. Work has gone on as normal, and we're on Teams, we're on Zooms, we're on lots of these products that allow us to do that. And this technology has been there for some time. We had a very long conversation with one of the big modular guys, and just the integration of technology into their design and delivery of their work on site, which was a phenomenal meeting last Friday. I think if we look at modular in particular, there's a huge opportunity for the modular guys to deliver buildings now in a quicker, safer, faster way, where we're going to have less people on site, and there's an opportunity to kind of embrace the restrictions of coronavirus, that perhaps we're not going to be allowed to have so many people on site, and so that we take some of the modular technology and manufacture the buildings in controlled factory environments and deliver to a site. So we're reducing the number of people on site, reducing the number of truck movements, saving materials, and obviously health and safety is a huge issue, which is greatly benefited by modular construction as well. So I think a huge, with every change, with every difficulty, there's certainly opportunities. So
yeah. But will those opportunities? Sorry, Shane, I want to bring you in here because I'm just wondering. There is a gap between the organisations that have embraced technology and those who haven't. And Arthur, I absolutely agree that there's an opportunity here, but I think that opportunity is more for the companies that have been preparing for this, and I'm not convinced that the majority have been. So, Shane, what are you seeing across your members?
Yeah, no, I think you're both right to an extent. I think the people who've been adopting technology, be it BIM or modern forms of construction production, they'll have a head start. But I've just been struck, as Arthur is alluding to there, I've been struck by everyone, our own organisations and other companies there, the responsiveness to change now that there is a crisis, and like the resilience of the industry as well. So on a number of Zoom calls every day where we're collectively maybe 40 leading companies are working together to develop new standard operating procedures. So there's a real responsiveness. It just required a big crisis like this to really drive it forward. So that's one point. And I think on the technology side, it's going to play a huge role in future. Even the BIM will need to, start to address lower productivity levels or longer timelines to finish bundles of work. BIM will probably have a role to play in avoiding clashes, and by clashes in this case I mean too many teams in one area of a building. It's a huge opportunity for the housing and development side, more so the house building side, to adopt BIM planning and other technologies, all the way down to simple things like contact tracing. So reading what happened in South Korea and other Far Eastern countries like that, and how they flattened their curves so quickly and at such a level. They were using RFID tagging. If you went into a carriage in a train, you touched your phone off a contact point and it recorded where you were. And in the eventuality that you were then diagnosed with COVID later on, they were able to trace back to all the other people in that carriage. So I think that the technology will play a huge role in this going forward. And you're right, the companies that adapt to it will really, and they're doing so, will really benefit in the post-COVID world. My only concern, and Arthur might have a view on this, is, we ourselves in Ireland may recover, and we hopefully will get one of these V-shaped recoveries. However, our external markets, the UK and the US, look like they're going to be really in a lot of difficulty in the coming years. They're going to have very bad pandemics. No such thing as a good one, I suppose. But that will have an impact, I suppose, on international money flowing into the country here in terms of the development side. And on the larger FDI side, what we've noticed is that these companies are classified as essential services. So they're keeping utilities going, they're keeping power going, they're keeping healthcare, global healthcare supply chains and data supply chains going. So they're essential services. So we would see a point in the not too distant future where those companies would classify themselves as essential, and that would open up an opportunity for our industry to support those services in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Arthur, do you want to come in?
I think it's a genuine concern, and I do believe that our government or our guys at the moment are working their way through Corona, and it's a credit to everybody involved, from the health sector, the general public, the government. Everybody's working hard, and I think we are going to flatten this curve. But I think you're right. The effect on other countries, namely Germany and the UK, the US and the UK, who are our biggest FDI guys, and probably where a huge amount of our funding is coming for our construction projects. That is a concern. But I suppose that the positive twist to that is, if these guys can't make money in wherever else is affected by whatever. And there's an opportunity for them to make money here in Ireland. I know that sounds very, very probably harsh and cruel, but I think the money will flow to where they can make profits on it. So I'd be less concerned. Whilst I am concerned, I'd be probably less concerned because if there's an opportunity for everyone to do well, they're going to chase that opportunity, even if it's not in their own country. And I think we probably bode well as we come out of this quicker than other countries.
Actually, on that point, Arthur, I think certainly Professor Ronan Lyons, writing in the Sunday papers over the weekend, I think he would be inclined to agree with you. In fact, one of the points he made was that the PRS sector is likely to become more important and not less important throughout this crisis and in the process of recovering from it, because Ireland will need long-term capital coming into the country to rebuild our real estate assets. But Shane, as you rightly pointed out, this conversation is probably very premature, and we still have a number of weeks to go before we'll get any more clarity in that. But gentlemen, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Shane Dempsey from the Construction Industry Federation and Arthur O'Brien of C&W O'Brien Architects. Again, thank you both for taking the time out today in between Zoom meetings and all of the other meetings that are happening remotely. That's it from us today. Thank you for listening to Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show where property matters. Get in touch with the show by emailing hello@ipropertyradio.com or on Twitter @ipropertyradio. Also, I'd like to thank Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Tallon from Hear Me Roar Media, who had plenty of help from Sarah Kennedy of C&W O'Brien Architects and Hayley Rock from Construction Network Ireland. Certainly in these times, it takes a village, folks. So we're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, stay safe.